Well, hello and welcome. It is 8 o'clock in the United Kingdom, and we are very excited to have Charles Eisenstein with us, who of course is in the movie and the docu-series and has agreed to come in and chat with us this evening. So in the window below you, we have the movie and the series producer, director, Nikki Luna Williams, and over here we have Charles Eisenstein. Good evening, Charles.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. Thank you so much.
I have to say, Charles is really an awesome guest, and known across the world for your eloquence as both a wordsmith and an orator. So it's a real honor to have you here. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. I hope I can live up to that temporarily, at least.
Well, we're very excited, and we've read The Coronation, which is your latest essay all about the coronavirus, and we've also we posted it up into the description for this live broadcast that's going out across YouTube, our Facebook page, and our Facebook group, and it's also being shared as watch parties in some other groups that we are working closely with. So we should be getting a big audience. In fact, we've got 285 in already. So with 1 minute in, this is it's going to look like it's going to be a busy evening, Charles. So I'd just like to start by saying that Charles's website is charleseisenstein.org. And Charles gives a huge amount of his work away for free, and asks for donations at charleseisenstein.org/donate. And he also has a Facebook page, Charles Eisenstein Official. And the Time of the Sixth Sun, we have a movie which is available, which is just $4.95 to rent. And there's also a 19.5-hour deep dive experience, which is 8 docu-series episodes with the movie. And if you'd like to donate to help with our ongoing costs, then you're able to do so as well. And all the links for those are in the description. And we also really love you to share these live videos with others. So Nikki, I'm going to hand over to you.
Lovely. Well, I'd really like to just take a moment just to breathe and connect. I don't normally do that at the beginning of the show, but it's just with that technology and having a screen. So it's just, I want to tune in and connect with Charles and also the rest of the audience. Okay, so we've got a few questions for you, Charles. I decided that with this interview, I wanted to stay in the void of the unknown and just stay with what's very present for me. So when you spoke to me yesterday afternoon, I was right in the middle of, I wasn't bawling my eyes out, but my mum passed recently, and, I'm kind of just going through the mourning and the grief. And it made me think about all the people around the world. There's a lot of people who are losing those dear to them. But also there's the collective grief that we're all going through of what we left behind in 2019, that world that was very much our comfort zone. So lungs being grief, I'm just wondering what your feelings are about the collective grief that is surrounding our diminishing human rights and our very humanity. What are your thoughts on that, Charles?
Maybe I'll just start by saying a little bit about what grief is, or what it is to me, how I understand it. It's the way that we integrate certain truths, especially the truth of loss. When we suffer a loss, in order to really bring that loss into our being, so that we become, so that we grow in can incorporate that truth, we go through a process of grief. Grief is, you could even say, the feeling of reorganizing yourself around a loss. And it also brings us to a deeper truth, which is, as Francis Weller says it so beautifully, that everything you love, you will lose. Everything. Every person, every place, every part of yourself, everything that you love, you will one day lose. So when we go through the grief process, we come further into the truth of that, which then allows us to hold those things that we love more precious. If you are under the illusion that you're never going to lose it, then you're probably not going to treat it as precious. This is one thing I've learned as a father, that now none of my children have died, but you know, that little baby that they once were, that little kid, that being is no longer here. That particular time of my life is no longer here. That kind of relationship I had with the little baby and holding him, you know, and like that is gone. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, you know, if I had only appreciated it more at the time, how precious each of those days was.
Yeah.
And I feel the grief of that loss, then that primes me to appreciate what moments I do have with my precious ones. And if I have the good fortune to become a grandfather, boy, I'm really going to make the most of those little cutums, you know? So you asked about more of a collective level of grief.
Well, both. I mean, it's that you're talking about the impermanence of life, aren't you? It's like
right.
Every moment, presence.
Right. Yeah. So grief brings us into the recognition and the integration of the impermanence of life. So it's really important, especially in a culture that is so dedicated toward preservation and control, as if we could, if we try hard enough, we can keep things the way that they are forever. And even the illusion extends to, we could even conquer death. There's a technological aspect to that ambition that was, that seemed to have a lot of promise 50 years ago in the visions of the future. And you still hear it today, that we're on the verge of breakthroughs that will vastly extend the human lifespan and so forth. And perhaps integrating cyborg parts, you know, and engineering the genes, and also, and you know, that someday we'll have enough technology and enough safety, enough security, so that we could live forever. Now, part of us knows that that is a delusion and a dangerous one, but that's part of it. And then there's also just the pretense. If we can't actually conquer death, we could deny death. We could pretend that we're going to live forever. And in our culture, this is expressed as a fetish for youth, so that our concept of beauty is a young person, and we try to and we hide death. We put it away in nursing homes and morgues. You don't often see a dead person. In a lot of places in the developed world, it's illegal actually to care for your own dead and to bury them yourself. So there's a whole system that insulates us from death, even in the language with euphemisms. So one thing that's coming up a lot with the coronavirus situation is that we're being confronted with just how much we are willing to sacrifice on the altar of death avoidance, of risk minimization, of safety. I always get a little annoyed when someone's, you know, with their farewell is stay safe. I'm like, isn't there more to life than staying safe? Isn't there more to life than living as long as possible? If we were indeed immortal, if we indeed had infinite lifespans, then I could see their point, you know, to not let life be taken from me. But if I'm going to die anyway, then it's no longer a question of how do I live forever.
Yeah.
It's a question of how do I live right? How do I live well? How do I live fully? So this is something that the debate around COVID-19 kind of leaves out. You know, it's a lot of the debate is about lockdown and quarantine. Are they actually saving lives? And how many lives are they saving? And would it be better to develop herd immunity? And will the vaccine come in time to save lives? Like this whole thing, save lives. What does that actually mean?
Yeah.
It actually means postponing death. No life is ever saved. And when we recognize that, then we can say, we ask other questions like, what are we sacrificing in order to postpone a certain number of deaths? And that doesn't to say that we should never postpone death, and we shouldn't have, fire codes in buildings and, seatbelts in cars and things like that. But it's a matter of relative values. So to really look into what are we sacrificing, and is it worth it? Do we want to make that choice as well for ourselves personally, but also as a collective?
Yeah.
So anyway, I could go on, and I will if you want me to, but maybe I'll pause for a second.
So this collective grief, because it has a slightly different feeling to it, of stepping out of our comfort zones. We're now in that space of void, of the unknown, which humans are very uncomfortable with. It forces us to be very present. What about that collective grief that we're all displaying? It seems that, there's a lot of intensity. People are being pitted against each other, especially with their perspectives.
Yeah. So collective grief, as you were saying before, this gets really complicated, because we could say we need to enter collective grief for the things that are lost, such as hugs, handshakes, parties, gatherings, dances, festivals, churches, just, the experience of public gathering. But to say that we have to grieve those things, are those things dead, or are they just asleep? There's a fatalism here that I'm a little bit wary of. Like to say that, well, okay, and this is something that we're hearing from authorities. Fauci said that we should never shake hands again. And we're hearing that we'll never be able to go back to normal. Maybe if we get a vaccine, we can go back to normal. But then there's always another virus that could come. There's a constant threat.
Yeah.
Just like after 9/11, it's not like you can ever end the war on terror when terror is killed. You can't kill terror. There's especially when the response to terror generates even more terrorists. And we could also say that the response to COVID-19 is going to generate more ill health and even more susceptibility to infection, because immunity is built in part on interaction with the social and biological world. So if you're living in an aseptic bubble and not getting challenges to your immune system, you become all the more susceptible to further infections. And if the response to an infection, to an epidemic, is quarantine, lockdown, distancing, isolation, then you're going to be doing that again and again and again until it becomes permanent. So anyway, to say that we have to grieve these things that are lost, that already presumes that they are lost, and that everybody agrees that we can't do that anymore. And I think that needs to be questioned.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like this terror thing. It's kind of putting a real overload on our adrenals, and I'm seeing people have that sort of fight or flight alert, which is what our government told us to do earlier on in the week, and it's they've already created it really. Like what I see is it's just it's this virus seems to it's changed how we live, but it's also changed how we die. In my personal experience, they've got a queue. My mum's still on a slab in some mortuary, weeks after, and it's interesting, the whole funeral thing of not being able to stand next to your loved ones and hug them, and in your shared grief. Anyway, it's changed a lot, but you're right, it's not.
And it's not a black and white issue. If we were facing bubonic plague and 70% of some city, during the Black Death, there were maybe overall the death rate was 30 or 50%, but in some places it was 70, 80, 90%. Sometimes an entire village was wiped out. If we were facing a situation like that, then I probably wouldn't want to go to a funeral or any social gathering.
No.
And if it were on the other extreme, suppose someone said, okay, we have to all go into lockdown because if we don't, one person will die. And you say, no, that's not worth it. Oh, don't you care about this person's life? So that's another extreme. And right now we're somewhere in the middle. Initially, it was not clear where in the middle we were. The early statistics that were promulgated by the WHO were saying 3.4% fatality rate. I mean, that's really high. Now, as testing becomes more widespread, it looks like the fatality rate is much, much lower.
Yeah.
And so this question again is coming up. How do we want to live and what are we sacrificing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a distortion. So we talked about the coronation, and Teo did put your piece up. I just want to read that one paragraph for you to comment on. This is brilliant. You say COVID-19 is like a rehab intervention that breaks the addictive hold of normality. To interrupt a habit is to make it visible. It is to turn it from a compulsion to a choice. When the crisis subsides, we might have occasion to ask whether we want to return to normal, or whether there might be something we've seen during this break in the routines that we want to bring into our future. So essentially, is this outbreak, in fact, a breakout and an opportunity for us to gain 2020 vision, to see things more clearly and then make different choices, Charles?
I do think it's an opportunity for that. I do not think it's a guarantee that we will do that. We're being shown the path that we've been on for a long time. Nothing happening under COVID-19 is actually really new. It's just the extreme of trends that have been underway for decades, if not longer. We've become less and less social. More and more of life has been happening indoors. More and more of life has been happening on screen. We've become more and more fearful of each other. We've become more and more surveilled and tracked by the government. Various freedoms have been dwindling. The power of medical authority over our lives has been increasing. Like, all of these are existing trends. So we're kind of, commerce has been moving online. Small business has been suffering. Like, all of the things now it's being decimated, and we're being forced to live in the direction that we've been going already. So this is what I was saying. It's turning a compulsion into a choice. These have been seemingly inevitable processes that were beneath most people's notice, actually.
Yeah.
If you stop to look, you'd be like, the society is moving in this direction, more and more security, surveillance, digitization, separation. But it was so gradual, and we were so caught up in it that we didn't really feel like we were making a choice to go in that direction. So now we're being shown the direction in spades where we've been going. And therefore, we do have a choice now. That do we want to keep going in this direction? And at the same time, a lot of the things that have been interrupted, maybe we'll be like, we don't want to go back to that. Do we want to go back to, like, a lot of people now are cooking at home again. I think that cooking videos are like the most popular YouTube videos. They haven't censored those, So like, I think a lot of people are gaining new skills and new habits, and like, wow, maybe I don't want to be so dependent on takeout, and like, maybe and a lot of people are planting gardens that haven't done that before. So maybe that's something else, like that we will want to keep from this, quote, new normal. Maybe we don't need to travel so much. Like, that's actually, I'm very happy to have a break from travel and to not have to, say yes or no to these public speaking invitations that, anyway, I had felt a bit trapped in my profession, and now I don't have to do that. And I'm not sure when we go back, if we go back to normal. I mean, this is also questionable, this idea of going back to normal. The question really is, what shall we make of the world now?
I think there's also an impotence, though, that comes with that. Many people don't want to go back to normal. They've been voicing that, and yet we feel impotent in the face of, all the government and media manipulation.
Yes. Right. And that's a whole other thing, too. What's been happening to our democracy. I mean, this is not new, that the citizenry has very little say in what governments are doing to them and on their behalf. Like, this has been going on a long time. Now it's really in our face.
Yeah.
So yeah, in many ways, we're being shown different futures. We're being shown a future, on the one hand, of intensifying totalitarian control and fear and separation and digitization. We're also being shown a future where we take care of each other, where we rebuild communities, where we gain food sovereignty, where we, like, a lot of people are not on the official level, but on the grassroots level, people are looking into alternative health practices. You don't see the CDC or the WHO saying, well, okay, people should meditate more. It increases your immunity, or take herbs. In fact, these are being suppressed, actively suppressed. But a lot of people are still looking into those, and so this emphasis on health and wellness, that can be something of the new normal that we want to adopt. So yeah, cooking and reskilling and being in community, not traveling so much, being more local. All these things are part of another future. So that's why I evoked the image in the piece of standing at a crossroads, and there are paths radiating out before us in many directions.
Yep.
And we have a pause here where we can decide. We're being shown so many futures, some of them horrific, some of them beautiful. And we get to choose what our next step is going to be. And this is no guarantee that we are going to end up in a utopia. And it is no shortcut around the inner and outer struggle that is necessary to claim our choice. This will require will. If we do not exercise will, personally and collectively, politically, then we will continue going in the direction that we've always been going. But we have this wake-up call where now we can exercise some will, and we can make a conscious choice.
Yeah.
That's why I called it the coronation. It's a initiation into sovereignty. We're being offered a crown. Now we don't have to accept that. We can continue to be the slaves of the systems and the lives and the reality that has been foisted upon us. But we don't have to. That is a fundamental truth. We always have a choice, not necessarily in what circumstances we find ourselves in, but we have a choice about how to respond to those circumstances. We have a choice of what step to take.
I guess there's just a lot of fear for people around making a choice and what the repercussions of making that choice are, like speaking out the truth, one's truth. Yeah.
Like, as I said, it requires will and courage even. It's not the path of least resistance to change direction. There's a lot of momentum. It's not just in the government, the corporations, the systems, those who are preventing holistic or alternative viewpoints from spreading or practices from being. It's not just them, it's within ourselves as well.
Yeah.
There's part of me that does want to go back to normal. Even as simultaneously I recognize that it wasn't working, not for most of the world and not even for me.
Yeah.
But there's part of me that wants to go back to that. And as long as that part is still there, I will be deluded to just blame the resistance to change on the government or on, some conspiratorial cabal. That is a victim mentality that is actually fully aligned with the conventional view of this killer virus that is victimizing us. And that ignores the interrelationship between the body and the virus, or between the self and the government, or the inner and the outer. We are not separate beings. So basically, the conventional germ theory of disease, where we're kind of randomly victimized if our defenses are weak in this war metaphor by a virus, is of a kind. That conventional germ theory is of a kind with other forms of the war against the world, other forms of victim, perpetrator, rescuer dynamics, and that allows us to abdicate our responsibility and our power. Yeah.
I have the right words in my name, family name, Williams. It's Will I Am. So we were talking about conspiracy theories, and so we have a slight conundrum, which we were just saying to you before we came on air. And I'm hoping that you can pour some light on to it for myself and others listening. And Taya and I, we rely on our Facebook group page to publicize and obviously sell our movie, our film. And therefore, we are careful about what we say within our Facebook group about discussing things, Teo, discussing things like, oh, there you go, that thing that shouldn't be spoken about. Thank you. For fear of having our Facebook group shut down. Thanks, Teo. So, Teo, how many warnings have we had so far?
5 so far.
For things that you've posted, or things that just people in the group have posted?
So there's 27,000 plus people in the Facebook group, and when people post anything about any of those things that we just showed on screen now, and the reason I'm not saying them out loud is because they're using AI bots, so artificial intelligent bots. This live recording that we are doing now is being automatically transcribed, and it will show those things up, and then it'll get highlighted, which is why I'm not saying those words out loud. And then you get warnings, basically, and then they warn you to say that unless you remove these posts, which have been proven false by fact checker, even though if you go and have a look who the largest donor to fact checker is, it's a very interesting organization. And then they say we will reduce the relevance of your posts, which means that you will be shown, your posts will be shown less on your Facebook page and your Facebook group. And it's Orwellian.
Well, it's blackmail. So, yeah, we can't control what 27,000 people want to talk about. So what I wanted to say to you, Charles, is that, this is an infringement on our human rights and our right to freedom of speech. So can you talk a little bit about your take on conspiracy theories? Because there's a lot all over the internet. And to be honest, a lot of them contain a lot of truth that resonates with many of us. What are your insights? I know you're writing a new essay on it. Yeah,
I'm writing a new essay on conspiracy theories, or conspiracy theory. I'm calling it the conspiracy myth, which isn't to say, oh, those are just a myth. It's to say that they are a myth. It's very different to say they are a myth and to say they are just a myth. Because what is a myth? A myth is not a fantasy. A myth is it's a deep explanation for the world. It's a story of the world that tells us what's real, how things work, and who we are in that world. it gives us a way to make sense of things. So whether they are objectively, factually true or not, they carry truth in them. Personally, I do not think that the world can be fundamentally explained by a group of evil conspirators who are behind the scenes in charge of everything, operating the puppets that we think are our leaders. I think it gives them a little bit too much credit. And I think that the things that are happening can be explained in other ways. For example, there are unconscious conspiracies where no one's telling you to censor your. I wonder if censor is going to get you flagged for censorship, actually. Maybe I shouldn't say the word censor.
Oh, no, it's fine. We will just talk freely here.
So no one's telling you to censor those certain words from our dialogue, but you're doing it anyway. It could be, now in your case, it's because you've received a direct threat, but it could be more subtle. It could be simply that you know that if you do talk about those things, then you're going to seem a bit less respectable to others. Or you're part of a group where the group norm is that you don't have such beliefs. And in human beings, we have evolved for group harmony, and we choose our opinions very much based on what is acceptable to the group, to the in-group that we happen to be part of. There's a lot of research that demonstrates this. People are quite happy to believe something and convince themselves of something that they actually on some level know is not true, and then to display that opinion and even to criticize others who don't agree with that opinion, even if they themselves don't agree with it. But because that's a badge of social belonging. If you wear that badge, then you are accepted. So that can make things look like a conspiracy when they are not necessarily a conspiracy. We have this radar that is always attuned to what is going to allow us to be accepted and what's going to make us be rejected. And that radar is based on the deeper myths that govern our culture. So if you're, say, a scientist and you, this came up in a conversation that I was party to where there's this doctor, he's a conventional doctor, and he also practices emotional freedom technique, the EFT tapping, and he's like, this has been shown by research to increase immunoglobulin levels by 110%. If we had a pharmaceutical drug that did that, it would be a blockbuster drug and be prescribed all around the world. But here's this simple technique that anybody can do without a doctor, without spending any money at all, that has a bigger effect than any of our drugs. So he believes that. This was in a small group chat that he shared this. Is he going to make a YouTube video and go out in public and talk about that?
Probably not.
Probably not, because he knows what will happen to him if he does. Even other doctors who secretly agree with him might pile on because they don't want to seem the fool. It's the emperor's new clothes. Yeah. Imagine there's the emperor, no clothes, and you see that he has no clothes. And when finally someone calls it out in the story, everyone's like, yeah, he has no clothes. We agree. But what happens if someone calls it out? And even everyone else who also believe that he has no clothes, they don't want to be seen as the fool. So they continue pretending. So that's kind of what it's like for these doctors. It could be that in my essay that I'm writing now, I also recount a story from Rupert Sheldrake, the biologist who has all kinds of unacceptable views. And he was telling me once that he gave this talk to a group of scientists, animal behavioral scientists, and talking about his research in dogs who know when their owners are coming home and other telepathic phenomena in animals. And he says the talk was received with polite silence. And then afterwards, each one of the 6 senior scientists in the group came up to him, and when they were sure that no one else was listening, confided that they actually they believe him and that they have their pets do things like that. And he was like, all of you believe this, but everyone's pretending not to. So this is how a conspiracy can evolve. It's not, the main mechanism doesn't have to be a bunch of controllers at the top sending commands down the chain of command and forcing everybody to.
It's us.
Yeah, it is. Yes, there is a controller up there, but the controller isn't humans. The controller is the myth. It is the paradigm. It is the zeitgeist. And that makes things a lot more complicated, because if it were only some bad guys, if it were only, Bill Gates and whoever other bad guys you want to name, the problem would be easy to solve. You just got to get rid of those people.
Yeah. But
if the perpetrator of the conspiracy is the collective psyche, the story, the zeitgeist, the myth, there's no bad guy. And if you want to undo it, then you have to work at the level of myth. You have to change the psychology and change the experience of being that attracts that psychology. What predisposes people to believe the propaganda that we're being fed? The propaganda wouldn't work if we were not in a spiritual state that will receive that propaganda. So when I say when I talk about the conspiracy myth, it isn't just a myth. And I think that, like you said, a lot of the points that they bring up really deserve attention. All of those forbidden words, having to do with radio frequencies, or other. I could maybe think of other euphemisms for these things. Yeah. Various standard medical practices. These deserve scrutiny. So I kind of accept many, if not most, of the data points that are enrolled into conspiracy theories without necessarily accepting the theory itself.
Okay.
And that means that these myth makers are doing us an important service, because if it were not for these myths, it would be hard to see all of these things that are happening. They bring visibility to what would otherwise be invisible within the orthodoxy. Yeah. In the orthodoxy, why would you ever question any medical technology?
Yeah, I think your point there is so true. What you finished on there, it is, in my belief, it's the fact that it is starting a beautiful conversation and people are starting to question. Because for so long, if I just looked at my personal social media feed, if I would post any one of these theories up there, you'd have people that strongly believed it, strongly wouldn't. And exactly that, a lot of people that do believe in it won't say anything, they won't comment, they won't back you up. Whereas I'm seeing that more and more now. People are going, hold on a second, maybe there is something to this, whatever this might be. Maybe we do need to delve a little bit deeper into this.
Yes. And this is why I keep coming back again and again to not knowing. Because if somebody is going to entertain a radically different belief than the one that they already hold and that they have held and that has been reinforced by the society, if they're going to make that kind of change, they're going to have to let go of the old belief first before there's even room for a new belief. So I ask, what enables us to let go of a dearly held belief that we might have been invested in, that might be part of our identity, part of our entire worldview, part of our sense-making apparatus? It's not so easy. You can't just pluck it in and insert another belief and everything stays the same. It's part of an entire edifice of self and world. What makes somebody willing and brave enough to do that. Certainly not being attacked and assaulted by, someone who's trying to change their mind by force. It's more, I think this is a question, and maybe it's an open-ended question. What gives us the security and feeling of safety that we can deconstruct our castle of knowledge that may be unsound? And how do we welcome people into the space of the unknown? It's not by saying, I told you so. It's not by, doing a victory dance that they finally change their mind. That is, that's just another kind of war to divide between us and them. That actually
it just creates more separation, doesn't it?
It does,
of our duality, I suppose. I mean, I can really relate. I see myself in that. I'll read something and I think, wow, that really resonates for me. But I really don't know which way to go. And I guess it's what you were saying in your coronation piece, is that we are at this crossroads and it is a choice point. And actually, I've known, me and my friends have spoken about that for 10, 15, 20 years. This time is coming when we will have to choose. But it's very difficult to make that choice. And I can really relate to what you said about, seeking approval of, what decisions you make. And I guess it gets me to question discernment. It's the age of discernment. And how do you discern between what's true and what isn't?
Right. I mean, one reason why I haven't been more vocal in my criticism and dissent from some of the planks of the mainstream official view of things is that I'm not really sure. I have my leanings, have my opinions, but then do I really know? Like, have I really dived in fully into the worldview of the ones that I'm rejecting? Have I really studied conventional virology? I've studied quite a lot of unconventional virology, exosome theory, terrain theory, things like that. But have I really gone into the conventional theory and understood it from the inside? Or am I just critiquing a cartoon of what it really is, the cartoon presented by its critics? Most people don't go deeply into the other side's views.
So it's almost being able to stand in both sets of shoes and see the opposing perspectives to really then be able to make a clear choice.
Right. And I think that if both sides did that, that a lot of conventional belief and conventional policies and the whole thing would change radically. The biggest obstacle to that is people's attachment to being right. And if we are wanting that to happen, if we want this change to happen, then we also have to exemplify non-attachment to being right. We have to generate that morphic field of radical doubt, where we're willing to say, yeah, I was wrong. We're really willing to look at the other side on its own terms.
Yeah. A beautiful friend of mine once said, he said, everybody is making a decision and reacting to something based on the tools that they have at that time. And, who knows, within 3 weeks, you may have a completely different tool set and you're going to look at something an entirely different way. It's that cognitive dissonance. It's the fact that, exactly what you were saying. If you're challenging, if you've been conditioned one way, if you've been brought up with parents that gave you these very strong beliefs and that, that you've been pushed in that direction all your life. And then suddenly you have the red pill and it's very different from the blue pill. And you end up in that state of that awakening. And it's like, whoa! In fact, I think you wrote it right at the end of your article. I was reading about that. It's that separated form of template of initiation, separation from normality, followed by a dilemma, a breakdown, an ordeal, followed, if it is to be complete, by regeneration and celebration. This is the whole point of the awakening, is the fact that you have to go through this horrible stage to get to the other side. It's life.
So talking about discernment, you know, and discerning what's truth for you and what's fake these days. You know, I just look at something like the video that's been put up and seen, I don't know how many millions of times, with Judy Markowitz and her story. So much has come up to discredit her. I question that. Where is that coming from? Where is that discreditation coming from?
I have not gone too deeply down that rabbit hole.
But it could be any example when someone's discredited, when they come out saying something that's threatening to the...
Right. I mean, so there's probably many things going on at once. She's challenging dearly held paradigms. And to those who are immersed in those paradigms, any substantial challenge to them seems kind of crazy. You know, it's as if someone's challenging reality itself. The only person who would do that is a crazy person. So those who accept their theories and paradigms as reality itself are going to be predisposed to see someone like that as crazy. Secondly, there are financial interests at stake, which isn't to say that people are consciously trying to destroy her for the sake of money. It's just that people, I mean, that could be happening. It probably does happen. Like that happens. Okay. But more commonly, people believe what is convenient for them to believe. And if say you're, you know, making lots and lots of money selling solar panels, all right, and you have this entire ideology that this is helping the planet and saving us from catastrophic climate change and good for the environment, and then Michael Moore comes along or somebody else comes along and presents information that totally contradicts that view, most people aren't going to be like, oh, guess I was wrong. Most people are going to be like, hold on a minute. Is that really valid? They're going to subject that to intense scrutiny. Whereas if someone else comes along and provides some facts and figures about how many tons of CO2 this is saving and you're a good guy, thank you. Are you going to really look into that person's research? Are you going to check their raw data? Are you going to find some way to critique it and dismiss it? No. So this selection bias that human beings almost universally operate in order to believe what is convenient for them to believe and to dress things up in reason. So we all think ourselves very rational and evidence-based. So this is, again, something that happens on a systemic and unconscious level. And I'm sure that is part of what is happening to Judy Mikovits. And maybe she is wrong about some stuff. Maybe she's totally wrong. I don't know. A lot of what she says seems pretty reasonable to me. And she cites, you know, other people's research and so forth. And much of what she says is aligned with other things that I believe about biology and about the world, data points that I have from my personal experience, but that doesn't prove anything. And another thing is that, you know, she's a scientist. She's not an orator. She's not a public relations expert. She's not smooth. She's probably got personality flaws, just like you and I have. She's maybe very abrasive. Maybe she's, I mean, who knows? You know, there might be personal stuff. In fact, there's a book that she co-authored called Plague that goes into a lot of depth about what actually happened from her perspective when she was imprisoned and stuff, and how, you know, these people did her in, and it seemed plausible. My wife was reading that book and it seemed plausible to me, but again, that's her side of the story. So here you have two sides of the story.
That's discernment, isn't it?
Right.
Which resonates. What's your body? At the end of the day, the only thing that tells me what's truth is not going to be my head, because I get totally confused. Teo knows I'll switch one side to the other. But my body will tell me what resonates. It's my biggest marker of truth, I guess.
Yeah. So ultimately, that's the only place to go.
For me too.
Yeah. Because even if you, And someone might say, no, you can trust the evidence. Go by the evidence. But how do you know what evidence to accept as valid? Like someone can say that vaccines have never been tested against inert placebo for safety. Okay, lots of people say that they've only been tested against other ones that have a lot of the same toxic ingredients, or a lot of the same undetected viruses from the cell cultures that they were made from, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, there's a whole huge debate about that.
Yeah.
So someone says they've never been tested against inert placebo, and if I am predisposed to defy authority and toward holistic health, then I'm going to hear RFK Jr. say that, and I'm going to repeat that on Facebook. You might have repeated it, but do you actually know that that's true?
Yeah.
And if so, how would you know that it's true? What authority do you trust as a source of truth? And even if you do go to, how do you know that it's never been done? Like this, I'm not saying that you can't possibly know. What I'm saying is that most people don't do that diligence. They don't do that work, and we don't have time. Actually, there's no. The only way we can operate in the world is that we have to trust certain people who know more than we do about something.
I trust you, Charles.
Well, thank you. I don't know anything about anything, but here we have these conflicting authorities.
Yeah,
that's one thing that's in common between the CDC spokesperson and David Icke. What they have in common is that they both say, "Here's how it is," and like you're talking about discernment, like you have to base your choice of who to believe on something, and your own due diligence can only take you so far.
Yeah.
At some point, you have to trust the opinion of people who know more than you do. So it comes down to, who do I trust? And to answer that, we have to tap in to precognitive capacities of the human body.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Big conversation, isn't it? You talk about exiting the matrix. Can't remember where I've read it, but you talk about exiting the matrix. And my understanding of this is stepping away from mass consciousness, the mainstream narrative, the media and governmental manipulation of the masses. Is that the correct understanding of exiting the matrix? And to what end point?
Yeah. It's not to permanently exit the matrix. It's that this particular drama, you could call this whole thing a drama. Now, I'm not just talking about COVID. I'm talking about our entire civilization.
Yeah.
It's a play. It's a drama that assigns roles to every human being and narrates a storyline where we've come from and where we're going, and that enacts various scenes on this earth. And we can say, this is not a very beautiful drama anymore. I do not accept its premises. I do not accept its roles. I want to step out of that. But that is not the final step. The final step is to step into another one, because that's who we are. If you want to define what a human being is compared to other animals, we are storytelling animals. I believe that language evolved actually to tell stories, not to coordinate activity on the hunt or something like that. Anyway, that's a whole other thread. But we yearn for meaning. Stories are and meanings and agreements. That's how we coordinate with other human beings to accomplish what human beings can accomplish. Yeah. Without coordination over large numbers of humans, we cannot accomplish that much beyond what other animals can accomplish. Our uniquely human gifts emerge in coordination. And that happens through story and through agreement. So really the question, once we step out of the matrix, is what new story do we want to participate in, and to accept the roles that it assigns to us.
Yeah.
That sounds really abstract, but this could become very practical.
Well, you've got herstory, and I don't know what the future story, what the name for it is, but it's exactly what we are trying to create right now, is this future story. I think there are so many people, certainly of our tribe, I call it our global tribe, those who are like-minded and on this journey with us, but it's, yeah. Taya, have we got any questions?
We've had loads of questions coming in. Whether I can find them again, going back up this, because they're coming in so thick and fast. It's only showing me the last 12 minutes of questions.
Oh,
so I
forgot this was live, actually. Hey, everybody.
I got it. So if you had typed a question for Charles, and it disappeared, because I can only see the last 12 minutes of comments, because they are coming in thick and fast. So if you'd like to put that into the comment, whether you're on Facebook, on YouTube, then we're able to do so.
So whilst you're waiting for some of those, sorry, have you got a question?
Yeah, well, I was fascinated by, on page 20 of your thing, you talk about building an intentional society, and somebody actually posted a question very similar to this. In your view, what is an intentional society?
What did I mean when I said that? I think I was probably just talking about how we have kind of blindly accepted the vision of the future and of progress that we've grown up in, that we've received. Progress being a matter of increasing our control over the other. That's how progress has been defined, going back thousands of years, actually. And it's based on the mythology that holds humans separate from nature, holds me separate from you, and that holds nature and the material world as not having the full qualities of a self, i.e., intelligence, consciousness, purpose, beingness, like a reason to exist. It's just kind of a bunch of stuff out there, random forces. And we're marooned in this alien universe of blind force and mass. That's the fundamental, the fundamental assumption, the fundamental mythology. If you take that for granted, then progress means that you impose more and more of human intelligence and human design and human purpose onto a world that does not have it on its own. So if we, can cut down the forests and straighten the rivers and farm the land and domesticate the animals and harness the atom and control natural processes, insulate ourselves from natural forces, outcompete all of the other beings out there that are also separate selves, conquer the microbial world, eventually we can reach this paradise, this utopia of complete control, where nanotechnology and genetic engineering extend it down to the molecular level, just as earlier technology extended it to the macro level. Like, that's the mythology. And we've kind of taken that for granted. So, and become habituated to that. So I guess when I'm talking about an intentional society, it's that we no longer accept blindly the story that we have, that we're so used to.
Yeah. Did you see? Well, we interviewed Michael Tellinger last Thursday, and he's been working for the last 15 years or so. He's author. Do you know Michael Tellinger?
I may have spoken to him once.
Yeah, archaeologist, South Africa. Yeah, amazing guy. And he's been working on a town called Ubuntu.
Right. Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's his project is called One Small Town That Can Change the World. And his figures add up. Everyone in the community goes on as normal, but you have these collective cooperative businesses. everyone gives 3 hours a week voluntarily, and hey, you've got a town of 5,000 people. That's 15,000 man hours per week. No corporation can really compete with that, And but where for me, the hiccup was that it's based on having a free energy generator, that everyone has free energy. And you're never going to find a council or a mayor, well, I don't know, I'd like to hold the space open that you could, but I think that's the stinging point, is to find a council or a government that would allow free energy in that way, because they're not going to take their cut off the top. So you get a lot of fantastic projects like this where the maths do add up, but there's that control that stops it coming to fruition.
Yeah, and again, like,
great question here. So Will's asking, what do you feel is necessary to bring about a change in our patterns of consumption and materialism? And what do you feel is the underlying cause or causes that underpin excessive consumerism? So it feeds straight into what you're saying, Nikki.
Yeah. Okay. I would answer those two things in two different ways, but maybe I'll just start with the consumerism piece. What I think feeds excessive consumerism is the profound unmet needs of our society, of modern civilization. We are bereft as denizens of modern society. We are bereft of community. We are bereft of connection. We are bereft of purpose, of our full beingness, because we are so separated from the places and the people around us. We don't know what it's like actually to be a fully embodied, fully embedded human being. You have to go to remote parts of the world to see what that's like.
I was going to say, with the indigenous cultures.
Yes. But if you're in modern culture, then you have been, your ties have been truncated again and again and again. So that you look out the window and you don't even know what direction probably the largest tree within a mile is. And if there's like a little hill somewhere, you don't know any stories about that hill. You don't know what happened there. And you don't know where to find, you don't know the names of most of the plants around you. That is an historical aberration. Most people who have ever lived could name every single plant that they saw. Yeah. And every single bird, every single animal, every single insect, and tell you about their habits, tell you about their uses, tell you about the ways that they related to each other, tell you about the human stories that happened in relationship to those beings. The
ancestors,
grandma met grandpa, there it is right there. And here's what else happened there. Like everything was woven together in a meaning system. Everything was meaningful. Everything was part of your intimate world.
But the only way one can do that is when something's kept small and it's kept local.
Yes. And right. And so we're stripped of all that. We live in a world of strangers where we don't know the stories of the faces that we see. We don't know the uses of the plants. I mean, everything, you can take somebody and plunk them, like remove them from Birmingham and place them, in Leeds, and life is pretty much the same. You meet your needs in the same way. Like you make your money in the same way, you pay your rent, you go to the grocery store, you don't depend actually on what's around you. So we're disconnected. And this leaves us with a desperate need to restore those relationships. And that's not available. So instead, we consume. It's an addiction pattern. No matter how much you consume, will you ever meet those needs through consumption? No. And then we look at the damage that excessive consumption causes, and we blame it not on this void, but we blame it on greed. We think that the problem is with ourselves, that there's some bad thing that needs to be conquered. So that's part of the trap of consumerism.
So it is about community, really, going back into community again.
It's about relationship. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Restoring our full selves.
Our interconnectedness to everything that's immediately around us.
Yeah. I mean, the word Ubuntu actually sums it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is that you are your relationships. So when our relationships have been replaced by market relationships, then we become less. When relationships to the people and beings around us are cut off and replaced with marketized relationships to distant institutions, we become less. We become smaller, and we become hungry to recover our lost beingness. And that is what drives not only consumerism, but it also drives a lot of what we're seeing with COVID. Like that's one of the motivations of the mania for safety and for security. Because where does real security come from? It doesn't come from a mask and gloves. It doesn't come from a razor wire fence around your house. It doesn't come from a wall to keep the immigrants out and drones to bomb the terrorists. That's not security. And prisons to keep the bad people away from you. That's not security. Security is when you feel at home in the world. Yeah. When you belong, when you feel like you belong, that's security. So the hysteria, the fear, the panic around coronavirus, which objectively isn't actually that bad historically, compared to other things that have happened to humanity, the fear, the panic around it, that is a symptom. It's a symptom of our fundamental insecurity that is caused by the cutoff of our embeddedness, our relationships.
Which goes back to what you were saying in the coronation, our addiction to normality, the comfort zone.
Yeah, because if you've experienced this cutoff and are in this deficit, and all you have to compensate is the compensations of normality, the fake security from money and from Big Daddy to protect you, then you're going to really cling on to those things when they look like they might be taken away.
Yeah. I know when I'm at my happiest, it's certainly when I'm in my communities. Forest Row is a lovely alternative community. But when I'm with my tribe, when we are collaborating, cooperating collectively, it really truly is when I'm at my happiest and most comfortable, I think. Eating the food that's grown on our farms, that's prayed, and the kids go and visit the animals, and it's
and when you're really immersed in community, you're not as afraid of death. You still maybe have enough fear of death to keep yourself from getting into accidents and things. Fear of death is good. Fear is not a bad thing. In fact, it helps us maintain the boundaries of the world that we're supposed to be in for the time being. But people who are really connected, really in community, that they're not as afraid of death, because who they understand themselves to be is not limited to the separate individual. So the death of that individual is not the death of the full self. So that's anyway, I could go on, but maybe
just a little something, just like you the other day, Teo. I don't particularly want to go and walk around a supermarket, and suddenly Teo arrived at my door with 2 big bags of shopping, saying, "I've just bought everything that I thought you liked, and here you are." And it's like a week's shopping, but that was just such a community, beautiful thing to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yes, I have. Let's pull in this one from Mary Claire. She says, Charles, can you speak about your view of the potential for gift economics to help frame a new story, and thus also operating a system toward a culture that thrives on mutual flourishing and collective awakening from this separation consciousness and this scarcity myth?
Great question, Mary Claire.
Yeah. Trying to think of how to relate that to COVID-19. Maybe I'll start at the end with scarcity myth. it's quite striking how more and more people in the West, especially, are experiencing scarcity over the last few decades. How economic insecurity has been on the rise in the West, and World Bank statistics will say that poverty is decreasing in most of the world, but those statistics are based on GDP per capita. They're not based on the actual quality of life of these people. So when somebody transitions from a subsistence peasant agricultural life where they don't use money at all, or a hunter-gatherer life even, where they don't use money at all, where everything is gift economy, people help each other out, and they transition from that to a job in a maquiladora, or living in a slum and making $2 a day or $5 a day at some menial job, they're considered to have been lifted out of extreme poverty. So the statistics hide the reality. But anyway, so here we see this rising inequality and rising economic insecurity. I am most familiar with the situation in my country, where some 40-50% of people don't have an extra $800 to meet an emergency situation, living just on the edge, living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
Why is that? Is it because compared to a generation ago, our machines don't work as well? Is it because we've lost our technological know-how and technology has regressed? Is it because that there's less food being produced, less housing? No, none of these things. It has nothing to do with the quantity of the things that meet people's needs. It has everything to do with the distribution. That's why you could say that scarcity is a myth, and not in the sense that I was saying conspiracy is a myth. Well, actually, it is. It's a myth. It's a creation. It's a way of seeing the world that generates the reality that it talks about. If we were sharing all of our things, if we had community, then we would have plenty. We would have abundance. Not everybody has to have their own of everything. Not if we have, for example, if we have vibrant public spaces, civic spaces, then we don't need such big homes, because life is happening outside. Life is happening in the public space. That's a kind of a gift economy, actually, because by participating in the public square, you are giving benefits to everybody else who participates in the public square. That's called communal life. So gift economy, it takes a little bit of doing to say what I actually mean by gift economy when I talk about it. It's not, just giving people stuff that would otherwise be a market transaction. It's a totally different way of life.
It's thinking outside the box, isn't it?
Compared to where we are now, yeah.
Well, things like paying it forward or bartering, or many ways to exchange for things and to participate. In
but
things.
bartering is kind of trying to make market transactions work without money, but it's still the same pattern of I'll give you this, you give me that. Whereas a gift culture is, my neighbor might borrow my lawnmower or whatever. And that doesn't mean that, okay, he owes me one, I'm going to borrow his egg beater now. That's not how it works. He's been borrowing stuff from me for a long time, so I feel free to ask him for whatever kind of favor, or maybe not. Maybe I feel free to ask my other neighbor for something. And I know that he has been borrowing things from this other one and this other one, and it goes around in a circle and it comes back to my neighbor on the other side. Like that's how it is. It's the feeling of we're all in this together.
Yeah.
So the foundation for gift economy is to cultivate we're all in this together by letting down some of the boundaries and oppositional ways of seeing each other. That's the spirit, is that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Mm.
Great.
May I pull up another question?
Sure.
Okay, Harry says, do you see a split taking place in humanity? Those who wish to move into a new paradigm, moving into the resource-based economy, and those who are wanting to go back to normal?
Good question, Harry.
Yeah. Yes, I see this split in humanity, but I don't think that it's so much a matter of those who, want to move into the new story and those who want to stay in the old story. I see the split happening in myself and within all of us to some extent. It is, it feels, kind of nice to externalize that split. But anytime I see a split in the world outside, I look for its correlate in myself. And in this case, I see it very clearly. I mean, as I said earlier, there's definitely part of me that wants to go back to the old normal. I'm split in that.
Yeah.
And some of those retrograde desires are not visible to me until I'm confronted with them, as is happening in this situation of breakdown right now. So yeah.
I mean, I see that question almost a bit like I would describe it as having, there's a lot of us who have our feet in the very material, let's call it 3D world. And yet there's an aspect of ourselves that really wants to step out of that into, say, 5D world. And that's the split in us, is not being able to fully, because we do have to pay our rent and eat and everything. So we are split between what we have, the way we want to live, and the way we have to live right now.
Yeah, and also we have to look at those things that we think we have to do, those installations in reality that we think are part of reality that may not actually be part of reality. Like people, well, we have to lock down. It depends on what you take for granted. And if you go to the level of free energy devices that you were talking about earlier, then a lot of the things that we assume may not be true, may not actually be worthy of our assumption. So,
like what? Sorry, just explain that.
I'm not sure how far afield I want to go.
Okay.
But let's just say that a lot of what we take for granted as medically necessary, for example, like you said, okay, I'm not going to try to dispute that you have to eat. Although I have met people in my life who have not eaten for many years.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you don't have to eat. Once you get into these realms, there's a lot of mystery and paradox.
Yeah.
And when the objectivity of reality itself begins to break down, as it must with some of these farther out technologies, then it's hard even to talk about it using the words that we're familiar with.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why I don't want to go like too deep into these metaphysics.
Yeah.
But I would just keep it in a more mundane level. Just that a lot of what we assume is necessary for our safety and our health. I mean, even down to the mundane level of, well, of course we all have to wear masks forevermore. Like some of these things could do with some questioning. Like, what are the assumptions that they're based on?
Yeah.
And if you want, you can take it all the way to the necessities of life. But
I think what's clear for me, Charles, is that it's an absolute blessing, this which has come upon us, and because it has given us just that chance to stop, slow down. It's shone a light on definitely on the inequalities in the world. And it's given us an opportunity. I can't think. We've talked about this stuff, I say to some people, we've been calling this in for years. We shouldn't be surprised. Here it is, the shift, to something else. And yeah,
it is potentially a blessing, and it's also a horrible curse for. I mean, for the people who are facing starvation now, which is a lot. Tens of millions of people are unable to feed their children because of the economic collapse that lockdown has caused. And we're not talking just that your kid is hungry tonight. It goes to bed hungry. I mean, that's been happening in the US even. But I mean, your kid's hasn't had food for days, kind of thing. Like that is happening to tens of millions of people. And when we talk about the pluses and minuses, the epidemiological pluses and minuses of lockdown and herd immunity, those people are totally left out of the equation.
Yeah.
And then there's the, in my own society, the anguish of the loneliness. One doctor who I was in communication with was talking about one of his patients who's like an old man who had up until the lockdown been visited every day by his son. And now all of a sudden he is alone 24/7. And eventually he just stopped eating.
Yeah.
And then he was, put into the hospital where he's alone for his own safety. Like that little vignette, multiply that by millions and millions and millions. So yeah, you could say that it's a blessing.
No, I'm kind of retracting that now.
No, but it is a blessing also. It's not, I wouldn't retract it. It is a blessing also. In the same way that many people say my cancer was a blessing. But if you ignore that you had cancer and you don't take in the totality of the situation. I mean, this is, I know that your website's very focused on the positive. And I think that these positive data points, these miracles, these potentialities, these new technologies, healing technologies, energy technologies, agricultural technologies, ecological technologies, all these ways that we can heal the world. These are important. These are left out of the dominant discourse. They're pushed to the margins. The potential of what human beings can do, what they can create, how they can heal themselves and others. I mean, these data points are essential. Without these data points, we are in despair. And it's also important to bring in all of what we call the negative. Otherwise, how are we going to have the passion and the fire to change things if we don't know how bad things are? We have to bring in all the worst and the best, all of the data points. And I guess to return to the earlier theme of conspiracy theories, it's not like they are bringing to light some of the worst of human nature. I may not always agree on how they interpret that, how they weave that together into a meta narrative, but one friend of mine was they were having a Zoom call and someone broke into the Zoom call. You know how they spam Zoom calls.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, because security wasn't very good. If you know the room number, you can just break into the Zoom call and take it over. They were taking over with images of baby porn, like live, like things that were actually happening on video.
Wow.
Like there is an entire underbelly of our society that is also kept out. And the conspiracy theorists, they'll bring this up, like human trafficking and stuff. It's
and rightly so.
Yeah.
We have to speak up and put a stop to those sort of things.
Yeah.
For sure.
So there's that. There's the reality of ecocide. There are horrors that are happening on this earth. And they have to be kept out in order to maintain the dominant story. to maintain the status quo, to maintain the established order, you cannot really admit that such things happen on that scale. If they happen at all, it has to be, you know, some, you know, lonely psychopath, you know, who did these terrible things, but it can't be systemic. So, so one of the truths that the conspiracy myth reveals is that there is a rot pervading our system. So that horror and that evil, that has to be taken in too, without escaping onto blaming evil on evil people.
Yep.
It's mostly systemic. And even, and so even, this is like another long discourse that maybe we don't have time anymore, but
we could always come get you back and do it in some other time.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess I'm just saying that the opportunity upon us and the blessing that you refer to is to open the floodgates to all of the excluded information.
Yeah.
Best and the worst.
Yeah.
So that we have a bigger erector set to intentionally create a future.
Because for those I'm talking about it being a blessing to is those people don't want to see millions of people in refugee camps in Africa and, well, all over the world starving and not living within a fair system. We want to change that.
Yes.
So with 5 minutes to go, where do you, as a culmination of everything, what I'm still left feeling, and I didn't expect huge, big answers, but I've had a lot of understandings. Where do we go? How do we even start making these changes that we need to make? Oops, I've lost you. There you go. Because that's what I'm feeling, is that a lot of people are experiencing this almost paralyzation. Is that a word?
Yeah, paralysis.
Okay.
I think the answer to that question is unique to each person. I don't have a political formula for change, but I don't have a program. I have, ideas, proposals, we need to do this, we need to do that. We should have an eco core of young people. Instead of making them all go to school, they should be doing healing work, ecological healing work. So I have all kinds of ideas like that.
Council of Elders,
regenerative agriculture, emptying the prisons, restorative justice, et cetera, et cetera. But as for to personalize that question, what should the individual person listening to this do? It may not be to spread the word about all of these wonderful solutions. That may be your role, but it might not be. I don't have the definitive formula for how we should do this thing. But what I can say is that as we become clear on the destination that we want to reach, and we bow into service to that destination as if it were a being, to relate to the future as if it were a being, and bow into its service, we will be attuned to the opportunities to serve that future. We will recognize the next step toward that as it is communicated by that future through our bodies, through the organ of our heart, through the organ of our gut, so that we recognize which choice, which step is in service to that future. That happens. So the question is, how do we come into clearer relationship to this future being? And what clouds our vision of it? And what other beings might be speaking to us, and engaging our fears and inviting us onto other paths. And I guess all of us have had experiences in our lives where we caught a glimpse of the future, of the most beautiful future that we could imagine, and recognized it as a possibility. So in this moment, I would just affirm and salute that experience that has lodged in you. Maybe it was a mystical experience, or an experience of intimacy or cooperation, or generosity, something that said, this is an outreach of the future. And all just right now to salute that presence, and to invite it to guide you.
Yeah.
And then to be alert for the voice of that future whose emissary has lodged within you as a memory of an experience, to be alert to its call. And as you recognize the destination, you will recognize the steps toward that destination.
I love what you've just said, because our government gave us a very firm piece of advice the other day, and that was stay alert. And everyone is talking about it on the internet, and what does that mean to be alert? But that is just so beautiful for you to finish on that as the true meaning of remaining alert to what is. Yeah. Charles, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would so love that, it's such a conversation to have. I hope in the future maybe you'd come back and talk to us some more, because I'd love to discuss, which I knew we wouldn't have time for today, but about that inner process, because that's what it sounds like to me. And what I know it to be is that work is within each of us. And yet when people hear those words, the inner work, it's all within, it always has been, blah, blah, true, but they can't go any further with it. And I've spoken now to quite a few people, speakers in the past few weeks, and it keeps coming back to that. What is their individual inner process of creating new neural pathways, getting rid of the old programming? So would you come back and share a little bit of that with us?
Yeah, I can come back sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can leave it there. You're a busy man.
Maybe this isn't something that we do, though. Maybe it's happening.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, I could go, maybe another conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Charles. Really has been amazing. Teo, do you have anything to?
Yeah, just if, to show our gratitude to Charles, if you'd like to go and read any of his other essays and the forthcoming essay on the conspiracy myth, go to charleseisenstein.org. And if you'd like to give, there's a whole explanation on Charles's page, why they ask for donations, charleseisenstein.org/donate. You can also follow them on Facebook. And thank you to the, well over 700 of you who've been on live with us tonight. If you haven't yet seen Time of the Sixth Son, the movie, we'd love your support to rent that for $4.95. And it's a 108-minute movie you'll absolutely love. There's a digital access package. And, we have ongoing costs to run these live broadcasts twice a week. And if you're getting value from them, then you could also consider donating to Time of the Sixth Son as well. And if you can't, then share these live videos with others, and all the links are in the descriptions of these live talks. And everybody always asks, are they recorded? Yes, they're recorded, and you can go back to the Facebook or the YouTube link to watch those at any time. So Charles, thank you so much for giving up 90 minutes of your time to share with our beautiful tribe from all over the world. They really are all over the world. I was looking at the comments here, and I think well over 20 different countries we have watching this evening here in the UK, and the afternoon for you in the US. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Teo. Thanks, Nikki. Yeah,
so welcome. Thank you, everybody. We this coming Thursday, we have Helen Barton, who's from New Zealand, or living in New Zealand at the moment, and she's bringing through the spirit John the Beloved, who I took guidance from all the way through the making of this film. So he's got an absolute charming sense of humour. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you, Charles.
We'll post that up. And from us in the United Kingdom, of Charles in the US, good night and good afternoon. Bye-bye, everyone.